You should start off.
Okay. Okay. You know your 3, 2, and 1. Howdy, everyone. Welcome to Red Thoughts with Perry Picasso. I am your host, Perry Picasso, and today I'm joined by a lovely, amazing, talented artist.
Emmanuel. Thank you, thank you.
However, this time it's a little bit of a reverse, hence why I am on this side, and we have Emmett on this side with the doll. Because we're gonna have Emmett interview me today.
Yeah,
The work that I have at the museum.
totally. Well, I don't know. Let's get started with you. Who are you? Tell
Who am
me,
I?
tell me about yourself. Tell me about your work. Tell me about your practice. Who are you? Why are you an artist? Tell me everything.
Why am I an artist? Girl, we're gonna get deep in this. I mean, honestly, for me, I'm like, if I'm not doing art, I literally feel like I'm gonna go fucking crazy.
Mhm.
I'm not even gonna lie. But yeah, I ever since I could remember, like as cliche as it sounds, like I really was just always in the arts. Like I love to draw. I remember when it would be like a nice summer day outside and all the kids were running around playing in, in the street on their scooters and stuff. Like I would join them every now and then, but like a lot of the times I really would just like to sit outside and just like draw.
Mhm.
Every time in class I would just draw. But I didn't really think much of it, honestly.
Mhm.
Like I remember like elementary school, I really loved drawing, was chill, and in middle school, I took a drawing class. But the teacher was kind of a bitch. Literally, I remember being so afraid. Did you go to Loma?
No, but I think I've heard this
The
teacher.
South School? Like she was actually insane. Like I literally remember her being like, no water bottles are allowed in the classroom. And I was like, what? And like I remember just being so like I took that as an elective and I was so excited and I got into her class and I remember it being like a dead silent class the entire time and she was very serious the entire time and I remember just being so terrified of her that I dropped literally the next day and was like I'm gonna literally do TA or I forgot what I fucking did but I didn't do art.
You're like, I hate art now.
I hate art. I was like I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And so literally middle school didn't do it and then high school I think I took it again. Yeah, I did. And then I really did enjoy it with Miss Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Shout out Miss Fitz. Love you, girl. Don't think she watches these. And I really did enjoy it. And honestly, it was probably around that time that I probably was like having a little bit more, not serious, but like
Mhm.
just doing art more
Mhm.
frequently because I made like an Instagram account.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my God, I was like 14, made the account.
Yeah.
And then literally just
Right.
started posting art. And then, like, from there, it just kind of kept going.
Yeah. Totally. So, I don't know, how would you describe the transition from maybe, when you were first initiating this like perspective of the importance of art to where you are now as an artist? Like, can you kind of talk about some of those like transitionary like period and like
Yeah.
what differences kind of you feel like kind of happened, or what are you kind of carrying on from like maybe then to now? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there was a couple of different, like, pivotal moments. Like, I know that when I was in school, like in high school, I was
Mm-hmm.
doing art, but I didn't think, like I said, very much of it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember in middle school, I used to say that I was like, I'm going to be a fashion designer. And then I got to, high school. And then I think I said I wanted to be an architect because I really love math.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of the vibe, but I was like, art is just kind of fun, and I love drawing on there. And then at the
Mm-hmm.
time, I used to co-run a meme account, like an artist meme account, and like that was so fun. So for me, art was just literally just like a way for me to just have fun, and I didn't think very much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it wasn't until I think it was probably like, well, I mean, I guess it was more social media. Once I started getting like sort of like different brand deals and sponsorships, like
Yeah.
then that's when I was like, oh, something just like in my mind clicked, and I was like, if I want to make it out of this poverty, I need to lock in and do art. But I didn't. Again, it wasn't very much like I'm an artist per se. It was more of like, I need to pursue this,
Mm-hmm.
but more of just social media
Mm.
was sort of the vibe. And that's why I was
Mm-hmm.
running that meme account and we did like merch.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like my first job. It's so funny. Like, I used to always be a little bit jealous of like the folks who like worked at like Wendy's or like the bowling alley or something because like you guys have real jobs. I'm literally just like on my phone, literally
Yeah.
during my lunch, telling like some of my friends, "Hey, can you take a picture of me with this like watch for this company, like some bullshit like that?"
Yeah.
But so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do social media for work,
Mm.
and so that's where the art. And I was like, art is just like my way of like showcasing online on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And then senior year comes around, and I'm applying for colleges, and I applied for everywhere as architecture. Because again,
Mm.
I was dead set on being an architect
Yeah.
because I love math, and I was like, well, I also love art, so I was like, this would be a great way.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I my goal was Cal Poly,
Mm-hmm.
um, or was it San Luis Obispo? No, it was SLO and then Cal Poly,
Okay.
because they have good architecture programs. But then when I got there, for some reason, their financial aid did not give me very much.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, Berkeley and UCLA gave me good money,
Mm-hmm.
but Berkeley was kind of far.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, UCLA is a little bit closer.
Mm-hmm.
Also, with their program, you go into another program and then junior year you transition to architecture.
Oh, okay.
So it was a very strange program. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, if I go to UCLA, I can go do art for a little bit, have fun with that, and then transition to
Mm-hmm.
architecture. It's also pretty close to home.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me the most FAFSA of everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, this just kind of makes the most sense. And so then I'm still, senior year thinking I'm going to be an architect, not really thinking much of it. I was still posting my art on social media,
Yeah.
posting, I think every day at this point.
Oh.
Every day was either a new drawing or a new photo or a new something.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy to think about it now. I'm like, I don't know what kind of adrenaline I was running on. Survival mode, for
Yeah.
sure. Because I was like, I need to do this to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is funny because I really like that was one of my essays that I wrote for like my applications of like the one where it's like a freebie of like anything that you'd
Mm-hmm.
like to do that doesn't meet any of the
Yeah.
other questions I wrote about social media. Um, and go to UCLA, and then once I'm there, then that's when I was like, oh wait, this is kind of a vibe. I was like, I kind of do enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I just completely decided I was like, I'm just gonna do art. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do architecture.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, it was just kind of like a little switch that happened that kind of just I don't know, like it wasn't like very intentional. It was just
Yeah.
kind of like I was already there, and I was like, this is
Yeah.
kind of nice. Also, I did miss a deadline to apply for the arc. I didn't know you had to still apply again. I
Yeah.
don't know. It just like crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I already missed the deadline for it, but I'm still in the art programs. Let me just fucking go
Right.
with this. And I was already, like I said,
Yeah.
doing social media, doing
Yeah.
this. And then by this point, I was also doing photography and getting like different job opportunities. And I was like, this is kind of a vibe and I can make money off this. So like, why am I tripping?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
I don't have to answer the question.
Oh no,
I
you
forgot what the
did.
question.
I think I did.
Oh, and then what do I carry from it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I just sort of try my best to carry a lot of the youthful and just sort of
Mm-hmm.
like curiosity to keep going and trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, when I was first starting off, when I was 14, just doing it every day, like
Yeah.
it was just more of like me just having fun with it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't thinking like, I mean, like the art itself was like me having fun,
Yeah.
and like again, I was like, I just need to. The only thing I knew was I just need to make art,
Yeah.
put it out there, and people are gonna see it, and from there, opportunities are gonna come. But I just need to keep making good work.
Yeah.
And I think I just kind of kept
Right.
that going,
Right.
and then like the meme account, literally, it's a fucking meme account. Like how serious can I really be?
Mhm.
So like literally, just like I think trying to just have fun as much of it
Right.
as possible.
Yeah. Would you argue that like social media can be like I guess like this is another way of putting it, but like a tool for making art, like as like a paintbrush is for painting or a
Mm.
whatever, like do you feel like that has become not just like a platform to share like your work and stuff, but it's also maybe like even initiated, like you're saying it's like it was for the fun of it, it was for just to like share and yeah, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think it exists that way for you?
Like sort of what's it called? The social media as the canvas itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolutely. I think for myself, I haven't fully explored the depths of
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm still trying to navigate it, and every now and then I go through different shifts of what does social media mean for me, and
Yeah.
like going through different transitions of it. Like I said, at first being very like fun, not caring, and then there was a period where I was like very much afraid, and I was like, I need to have this go viral. I need to have this, and doing a lot of things like that. And then I crashed out, and then now I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out a balance between that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that there are some artists who do a really good job of that. Like, do you know Vita? Vita? No, in Vita. I'm sorry, Vita Kari. They do the one where they're like the craziest thing about being creative.
Oh yes, yes,
Love
yes.
them.
Aren't you friends with them?
I am.
Yeah.
Shout out Vita. Love you. They're such a slay. I
Yeah.
love. They're such an icon.
Yeah.
And I really do think that they are using social media
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
the medium of choice,
Choice.
because
Yeah.
if that video doesn't make sense outside of the context of
Yes.
being on social
Social media, right?
and so I think that that is sort of a good indicator of like,
Mm,
if you were to take this and put it outside of it, it wouldn't quite have the same context because
yeah.
it needs to function within these parameters. It's kind of like, I don't know, like if you were to try to do like a painting on like, I don't know, on a cloud, like what does that even mean? It doesn't work. Type
Yeah.
of vibe.
Yeah.
So yeah, for myself, I'm trying to figure it. I think I do a good job of recontextualizing my work for
Mm-hmm.
the social media,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I haven't fully made work using
Mm-hmm. I
the
mean, not that it
platform.
has to, but I think there is an interesting sort of like play that maybe has been happening like unintentionally. Um,
Mhm.
Also, I think this can actually lead us to our next sort of question of maybe the work that is actually presented at the Cheech, because this definitely plays with like this sort of simulation and thinking about
Yeah.
like Vita's work and this sort of like simulation is is like it's becoming ingrained with like the reality of social media that we already have, and
Mhm.
it like kind of gets lost, in that sort of translation. So speaking about simulation and losing it in translation,
Simulation, simulacra,
let's
my favorite thing.
yes. I mean, let's talk about Simulacra of Guillermo Hernandez. So this piece is your painting that is presented at the Cheech for our show Desde los Cielos. Um, I don't know. I think this is like a good transition to maybe the work and also the show itself. So, I mean, I could read the, should I read it? Okay. Okay, so
Also, the title's this whole ass long.
okay, let's read it all
It's a
together.
really long title.
Simulacra of Guillermo Hernandez, Beethoven y los
Washington.
Guachimontones, 2024. All right, so you wrote, this painting is rooted in my abuelito Guillermo's life growing up in Teotihuacan, Jalisco, where he played among the hills he would later in his life realize were the Guachimontones Huachimontones pyramids. The work delves into the Jean
Baudrillard.
Baudrillard's concepts of simulation, exploring how memory and myth are reimagined and distorted over time. A simulated chocolate pyramid made from Abuelita chocolates invites guests to deconstruct it piece by piece, leaving only a TV screening of Ancient Aliens. The act reflects our role in the gradual deconstruction of histories, both intentional and unintentional. Okay, so so let's talk about it.
About it.
Yeah,
like, where should
I don't even. Where do you want to start? Well, sorry, let's start with like. I mean, we'd definitely start with where, how did this come with the show and whatever. But I think I kind of want to talk about like this idea of the like simulacra, like what is,
Love.
yeah, like what's going on here, like what is being argued with this painting, based off this idea.
So, I am obsessed with this philosopher. His name is Jean Baudrillard. He's a French philosopher, and he has these collections of essays, which is titled of Simulation Simulacra. And essentially, this is what the Matrix is based off of. However, the Matrix kind of got it wrong. And Jean Baudrillard later on was like, "You guys kind of fucked up the. You guys missed the entire point of my fucking concept." So it's a pretty dense thing, but I'm going to try my best to like articulate it for folks. Also, don't fully quote me on this. Do your own sort of research, do your own sort of deep dives into this, because it is such a fascinating concept that this man came up with in, I think, like the 80s or something. So essentially, he proposes the idea of a simulation. And a simulation is essentially a perfect copy or perfect replica of something real. And it's so good that you can't distinguish it from reality. And he gives multiple examples. Like, he opens the book off with this he's like, imagine this king instructs this cartographer to make a map of the kingdom. And so the cartographer makes a map of the kingdom, but then the king is like, okay, no, I want you to make it life size. I want you to make it like literally life size and perfect to us. And so essentially the cartographer makes this huge map that goes over the entire kingdom and covers everything, that's like literally over the fucking thing. But then the kingdom itself falls apart, but the map remains because the map is separate from the kingdom. And so as a result, the kingdom is destroyed, but the people continue to live on the map. It's a very, I'm like, maybe that's not a good example. But the other example that they give is, he's like, another example is sort of like the idea of a patient simulating, what's it called? A sickness. So he's like, the difference between between a simulation and a copy or like a replica is a simulation. You cannot distinguish it from reality itself. So he's like, imagine somebody who's sick. Many people can fake being sick. Many people can copy being sick. Like, oh, I have a cough or whatever. But it's not quite the same as if somebody were to simulate being sick. And so essentially saying, imagine somebody was to simulate having some disease so well that they produce all of the exact same symptoms. Their body swells up, their body does everything exactly the same. That if you were to get both of these patients, do the MRI, do whatever test you need to do, they will both come out exactly the same, and like you cannot distinguish it. However, the difference is medicine is essentially useless to the person who is simulated, because there's nothing to cure. It's a simulation. But if we were to give both of them the cure, the antidote, the person who's actually sick will be healed, versus the person who's simulated, it does nothing because it's not real. And so that's what he started proposing, of like, if there's a simulation, it kind of threatens reality and threatens medicine. And he dives into a whole lot of different things of that, and how essentially over time a lot of these simulations, which are copies of copies, these simulations become then copied time and time again, until eventually you are left with what is known as a simulacra, in which it's a simulation with no direct reference point. So if you were to copy something so many times that it's no longer connected to the original. However, this simulacra is the only thing that remains. The original is destroyed, and now you just have this simulacra. Everybody who comes across the simulacra then begins to perceive it as reality, and more real than reality itself. And then it is then known as the hyperreal, in which the simulacra is again more real than reality. And for this one, I love to give the example of a Yankee candle, because I'm like, some of those candles, like, they smell so spot on that it's kind of crazy. And the example I always gave is when I went to the first time into the woods, into the mountains in Big Sur. I remember we like we get to the very top, and then I decide to roll down my windows, and I take a sniff, and I was like, "Oh my god, this smells like a Yankee Candle."
Mhm.
And then I was like,
Mhm.
"That's actually kind of really scary."
Yeah, that they're able to like. Yeah.
That like, why is the Yankee Candle smell more real than like literally in the fucking forest?
Yeah.
Like, make that make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
And
that
it's like, and it's interesting because it's like, I mean, with that example, it's like you could literally go do that for free and just, go into the woods. But now,
right.
like, it's like there's like all these translations that it goes through that now you're paying to like smell this and you're like home and be like, oh my gosh, I remember when I would go out to the woods and it would be like, bitch, just go outside.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, totally.
No,
Okay.
literally. And so in the books, that's what he sort of argues is
Right.
that the thing with capitalism is it simulates reality and then sells it back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you're saying right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you could literally go out there. However,
Yeah.
instead of you going out there, they're simulating it so perfectly so
Yeah.
that way you can experience that in your home.
Yeah, but pain. Paying.
And it tries to sell it back to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So,
A crazy gnarly book.
I mean, I guess, yeah, definitely. We should like all check this out. I kind of want to read it now too. Please share.
I-
Share the link.
This is my Bible. This is my Bible. Shout out Mr. Baudrillard. Yeah, no, I literally like
For sure. I need to see this after we're done with this talk. But I guess like now relating this back to the piece,
Thank you for the dog. What the fuck does this have to do with it?
So before we kind of get into the piece and kind of the conversations going on with, the simulacra, I don't know, I think we should definitely talk about the show itself, and
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've done it and you have done it with especially all the artists who, have kind of come through and talked about their work. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like, can you kind of talk about or start with like maybe when we first started talking about the show, like how that kind of started creating this idea for you for this piece and kind of, where that went there.
Yeah, I remember when we were first talking about this, like before the show, we were talking about sort of our frustrations with um, society. Society in general during one of our talks, and like how sort of we were talking about that, like there's a sort of like interesting connection between sci-fi and Chicano,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about like Star Wars. At least I brought up Star Wars and like the space buns, and then I remember you talking about corn being a gift from the heavens, and then we started talking about like the stars and how a lot of indigenous folks use the stars to as like a calendar of knowing when to plant certain things, and sort of like that interesting connection between the stars, the celestial beings, and Chicano, and just sort of different indigenous cultures. And I remember I was saying that like I've been wanting to do a piece about my abuelo and how I was sad when I realized like he died believing the aliens built the pyramids and our ancestors. Because I was like, he would watch the Ancient Aliens, and when he would watch that, I remember being as a kid thinking like, oh, haha, that's so funny. But like now as an adult, I'm like, that's really unfortunate that every time a brown body creates something,
Yep.
God forbids they're capable of doing anything because they're seen as primitive or incapable. And so therefore it must be aliens.
Yeah.
And that really broke my heart when I like realized that, and I was like, I hate that. So that's sort of where my frustration with that came about. And then as we started talking a little bit more about the show, and we had like the multiple different writings of it. I remember at 1st it was more about like there's a text that you had written about the Virgen de Guadalupe, and then the heavens and the earth and things of that nature. And then I think ultimately I was like, I think I was like, I love the Virgen, but I was like, I think expanding it to be more just like alien and sci-fi. So that way the artist had a lot more play and wiggle room with it. Sort of how that transition, at least for me, kind of came about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess because like your piece definitely goes along with that idea that you had about your grandfather, and um, I think in the show there's a lot of ideas that are being played with based off like the artist's interpretation. I think as we kind of went through different iterations of what we wanted the show to really kind of focus on. Um, like you said, it definitely allowed for more play for the artists to kind of hone in on what they were already working on and kind of weaving it into this like context. Um, but I don't know, I think something that we kind of talked about in some of our meetings, when we were planning, was kind of like this idea of like the alien, existing in this like sort of sci-fi realm and kind of, how does that relate to like the pop cultural context of like Alien, and but also like the political context of Alien, being like, illegal alien, and what does that mean?
The queer experience.
Exactly, and the queer experience and how that relates to that, and I think definitely like bringing it to the queer experience, something that often is argued, especially by like queer historians, is kind of this idea of relating the queer experience to like the idea of like the monster, or like in pop cultural references, or like the alien, the creature that like doesn't exist or doesn't belong. Yeah. And I don't know, I think like thinking about like the word alien, in that sort of context of not belonging, I think that's something that kind of, I don't know, kind of ran through a lot of these pieces. This sort of idea of like this disconnect, because like I guess in the museum, it's like, a museum that definitely showcases the community, the Chicano community. There needs to be that representation, but it's also unfortunate that, not necessarily with the museum, but just like in the culture, that even though we already are existent as a marginalized community, we still marginalize within ourselves, and I don't know, I guess like the idea of like alien also meaning something like feeling separate from, in many contexts, or like kind of losing like oneself or one's community because you don't belong and stuff. And so I think this idea of like loss kind of became very apparent, and so I guess I want to relate this back to your piece and kind of this idea of loss, like where or how would you describe that exists within like this idea that you're sharing about your grandfather? Yeah, kind of a broad.
I mean, yeah, I think that this piece, it sort of explores the different layers and nuances of the loss and disconnect, and sort of like trying to question it from like every angle of the colonizers telling us like we didn't do that, like destroying what we did,
Yeah.
hiding all evidence of possible creation, to my own active destruction of it,
Yeah.
and everyone else's, and also just sort of like the different layers of this. Like I said, like loss, of course, of my abuelo, of him passing away, and of the loss of our culture, the loss of all of these indigenous practices and knowledge that is no longer accessible and destroyed almost for all eternity, truly. Like so many things that we just cannot get back. Um, but the only thing that sort of remains is a lot of these simulations, a lot of these things that we, our people, did not get to have any say in, and somebody else who came in and told us this is what it is. And as a result of that, that is what I have to go based off of, because I have never stepped foot on that land, which is why it's a simulacra for me, because I haven't stepped foot on there. I don't know what the actual place physically looks like, because I haven't been there. I didn't live there. I don't know what the experiences of somebody in that region would experience and live through. And so there's that like disconnect of feeling like alien, of like, how do I connect with the culture that is so far removed? Because I grew up here, and I grew up like within the Mexican household, we have
Yeah.
a lot of these
Right.
different iconographies, different things,
Right.
different cultures, traditions. However, because we're living in America now,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these different practices, a lot of these different
Yeah.
cultural moments aren't quite the same
Yeah.
and have to be recontextualized,
Yeah.
resimulated.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's crazy. Like I haven't even really like thought about it that way. That like
Yeah.
the immigrant experience itself is like going through like a, a simulacra and kind of
Yeah,
having to
exactly.
lose all that, and so definitely, I think that's wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot with a
Yeah.
lot of our different cultures. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, Cinco de Mayo, girl, that's this is out there don't really celebrate that, but out here they go crazy.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
so it's sort of like different holidays like that
Yeah.
of like for example, like I love Dia de los Muertos, I think it's a beautiful, but like
Hmm.
personally though, like I'm my own
Yeah.
family lineage, I don't
Hmm.
think celebrated as
Yeah.
much as it does, but
Yeah.
I'm trying
Right.
to, and I think about that a lot with trying to figure out like what is acceptable, what is okay,
Yeah.
and like because I don't know, like I used to think about that a lot, which is
Yeah.
sort of like how sort of like everybody's like no tea, no shade, but
Yeah.
like a lot of folks are just very much like, oh, I'm from like an Aztec descent or I'm from
Yeah.
like
Right.
a Mayan descent, but it's like you're actually from a completely different region of Mexico.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
these are not where your
Yeah.
people are from.
Yeah.
Hence why, like for me, I was like,
Yeah.
well, where is my abuelo actually from? And
Yeah.
trying to like
Hmm.
piece that together because I'm
Yeah.
like, there is different ties from like my grandpa's side.
Hmm.
There is actually like some sort of lineage of
Hmm.
Aztec, but
Hmm.
again, I don't live there. I
Yeah.
don't know what the experiences are.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I try to do to
Right.
celebrate my culture is unfortunately a lot of simulations, a
Yeah.
lot of things that somebody took from that region, brought
Yeah.
it over here, and then recontextualized it
Yeah.
for the American audience.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the nuances of my work is
Yeah.
that like sort of like pointing that, and I think that's why I love Jean Baudrillard Simulation Simulacra because he points out a lot of these different things in a lot of different cultural moments,
Yeah.
but he doesn't necessarily say that it's like a good or bad thing, just rather that it exists
Something
at
that's
all,
happening, right? Hmm.
and sort of like to be on the lookout for that because
Yeah.
it can be used, it can be manipulated, it can turn into something really bad. It
Yeah.
can be easily manipulated.
Yeah.
However, it does not instinctually have to
No,
be.
totally. Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I think with that, like, I don't know, I think even, with you as an artist, like, being able to recontextualize, like, not just like, like this idea, right? But like,
Right. This,
but like also like the histories that from your family, from the regions that they're from, and from also like your like understanding of like, hey, maybe like this can get remanipulated in like a bad way. Like what's like, I mean, now that you have like that knowledge, like all of this, all this context, you're like kind of creating your own, simulacra with like intentions that hopefully like educate people and also like, bring beauty to like these like sacred grounds, and like I don't know, I think I don't know if I was like with you or I was with someone else, but like somebody was like talking about how like we were at the museum and we were like in front of your piece, and they like brought up they're like, oh, I went to these pyramids. I think they were talking about like the different pyramids ones in like like the city of Mexico.
like, really big.
Yeah, the big ones. But like, I think they were like reminded of that, and but they were like, yeah, like we used to love like going like down there and like taking pictures and like just being in that environment. But then like these like white people like went and ran up, and I was there when it happened, like up to the pyramid, and it was so awful and whatever. And anyway, like I don't know, like in. But like I guess like I don't know, just like that experience of like them being able to like witness your piece and like brought back like this sort of experience for them, where they were like, not just like oh, this was like a happy beautiful experience, but also kind of like, it sucks that this is like another form of like this, I don't know, corruption that happens within our culture, and
Yeah.
and I don't know, I think like your work is kind of doing that work, and not just like, in your work, but I think any sort of like even immigrants or children of immigrants who are kind of readapting or reestablishing like maybe traditions that like like you said, like for me either like I think within my Catholic like upbringing, like Dia de Muertos wasn't like a, I mean, like we knew about it, but like I don't think they grew up around that, but like I think at least for me, like each year I try to like do it, to like the extent that I can, and even though it's not something that like maybe like our own family like had as a tradition, like I think it's like a beautiful thing that definitely not with like the whole like capitalist version of it, like going to the store and purchasing all these things that we don't need, but like really making it about like you know family and thinking about like those antepasados that even maybe in like their life that was probably like not that great, like or like had like great values that were shared upon their own children or whatever, like there were still humans in our lives, and so yeah, I don't know, I think we're definitely building that like simulacra experience to not benefit but like to really speak to our own lives and
Your own truths.
truths, exactly. Yeah.
No, so that's what I exactly like. I'm like, I don't think that it's same with like Dia de los Muertos. Like, I don't think that because I didn't grow up with that
Mhm.
that I'm not able to. But I'm like, there is sort of different things of that you can take away,
Right.
like celebrating and honoring like a loved one and like
Mhm.
taking the time to have like your own rituals. Like it doesn't have to
Exactly.
be exactly like that. It can
Right.
be like your own sort of forms of meditation, your own forms of like
Yeah.
how can I give back to somebody I loved, and sort of like these different sort of elements.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be exactly how, like you're saying, like a
Yeah.
capitalist. Exactly what this goes back to. It like simulates it and
Yeah.
resells it back to us.
Yeah.
And trying to see through that and be like, what can I take away? Like, what is necessary? What is not necessary?
Mhm.
What do I value? What can I be like, okay, you know what? Like there are some things where I'm like, I will buy these things.
Yeah.
I just think, you know what, this might be a little silly thing, but it makes me happy.
Right.
So I'm gonna do it as opposed to like
Yeah.
I need to do this because this is how it needs
Yeah.
to be. So that's why I'm like
Yeah.
breaking away from the simulation.
Right.
That's why the Matrix is sort of like parts of the Matrix was right of like breaking
Yeah.
away from these
Yeah.
simulations, being like, oh, this isn't real.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah.
there are some elements that I can still take away and learn
Right.
how to play and navigate with
Totally.
those spheres.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, and also like definitely like there is truth, especially for like communities or indigenous communities who like still hold these practices,
Yeah.
as, and like there needs to be honor in that, but I think also like I don't know, I'm thinking right now as you were like talking, I was just thinking about like something that we would discuss in some of my classes when I was at school, like this idea of like the oral history and the significance of the oral history, because especially like in a lot of our communities or communities who dissent from indigenous peoples, like a lot of like physical histories are kind of lost, whether through like purge or whatever, and so like oral history becomes the way of like sharing our histories, and through that, unfortunately and fortunately, I think can get lost in translation as time goes on, as environments change, as populations fluctuate and whatever, but I think that's like a beautiful thing to think about. Definitely like there is stuff to mourn in that, we are losing maybe where like the significance comes from in the beginning, but I think if we understand that that's happening and still trying to like honor like those ways of being, but like we shouldn't like have to like not do things that our ancestors did because like that was like in a different time. Like we're able to readapt it to a new contextualize. Yeah,
Be more critical about what happened.
Totally. Totally.
Once you sort of break free from it and you're like, okay, simulation, like what is something that somebody put in there just because they were spiteful?
Yeah, right.
Like, there's some truth to it on. I think
Yeah.
that's what again this sort of draws back to, is that it is, because it's a simulation, it does come from some form of truth. It does come from some, it holds some value. However, because it's been so far removed, it's kind of like I'm trying to figure out like what is, what's okay, trying to recontextualize every time.
Yeah,
for
sure. Well, I guess, going back to the piece, I kind of want to talk about like the visual elements that you have, and I don't know how you kind of came about all of them, so go ahead. Talk about them.
I mean, I know that visually, I know that I really wanted to do, I was torn between, okay, either doing a painting or a sculpture because I love painting, sculpture, and mixed media and everything. But I was like, I really want to combine them both because I see the significance of it being like a painting, but it's my abuelo looking outwards at the TV in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So, visually, I was like, I know I want my grandpa. I know I want the Washimontones. And I wanted to include the abuelita chocolate because the abuelita chocolate I thought was a very. I remember when I was first talking about this to Esther, and like I was telling her about it, and she was just like, I was telling her that I was like, yeah, I want to have abuelita chocolate because abuelito, abuelita, it's kind of funny. And then I was like, and have him be eating the chocolate, so that way it's like a direct response to like the actual pyramid in front of him, and then have the ancient aliens because that's what he would watch. And she was just like, oh, this seems good, everything. She's like, but I'm not fully sold on the chocolate. Like, why would you want somebody to have the chocolate? And then I was like, it's a very valid point. Like, I need to think about it a little more. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like drawn again to the idea of a simulation and the idea of abuelita chocolate being a proof of a simulation because it's meant to mimic authentic indigenous chocolate making practices. However, it is nothing of the sort. It's owned by Nestle, produced here in the States. I think at one point it originally was from somebody in a region in Mexico, but it's no longer that anymore. And sort of like the idea of these things that are again sold back to us as authentic and Mexican chocolate, but it's not really that. And it's kind of like it does suck, but it's also like again, that's what I grew up with. This is what my culture is all of these different symbols. And so then when I thought about that, I was like, I think this is a perfect metaphor for literally the entire painting of like this thing being so precious to me, but I know that at the end of the day, it is fake. However, even though it is fake, it is it still holds weight, but it still holds weight to myself as a personal thing, but it also weight in the sense of the active destruction of many different things because Nestle is not a very good brand. It's not a very good company. And all of these different ways of essentially saying like you can resell our culture and different things of that nature. So anyway, so I knew like all of these different things, and so then when I was coming up with sort of the composition and the painting, I ended up finding different images online of the Washimontones from people who went there, who took pictures and posted them online. Because again, I haven't physically been there, so I was like, what better way than to literally just get photos of folks who went there, and just like see the different angles of different people, and then the sort of different elements in there of different references, like the way my abuelo's posing is a reference to a Norman Rockwell painting of the way he's like sitting, and in the painting it's this old man sitting down and he has like his dog on the floor or something. So I was like, I want to do something similar like that with my grandpa and his dog. And then the truck kind of came about because he had a truck, a Chevy, and we literally there was this like I just had a book lying down and there was a picture of a truck on the book and my sister was like, didn't grandpa have like a gray truck just like that? And I was like, oh my god, yes. And so then I ended up adding that. I was unsure whether or not to add the truck because I was like, I feel like I'm like, I was like, is this like a very just sort of like a common usage of adding like a truck to signify, you know, Chicano or sort of these different symbols. But I was like, no, he actually did have this truck. And then also I don't really draw very many tech things in a lot of my paintings. They're usually all very nature. And so I think that's the first time I drew it in any of my paintings, like something mechanical. And I think that it was probably honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, a good metaphor for the idea of these like because I'm used to drawing a lot of very nature organic materials, like this thing that was like forced in there. So I think it ultimately ended up working for that. And then the magueyes are not from that region of Mexico. They're from more from like my mom's side, but I was like, I'm gonna bring that in there to also include my other family. And again, because it's a simulation, a nice little fun way to break with that. Because unless you've been there, you would know that belong there. And so it's kind of like my own little way of like again tricking the viewer and being like, you guys
Yeah.
are trusting me to believe that this is real, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the clouds in the background, I wanted it to be like a sunset, sort of like
Yeah.
after a long day of work, like my grandpa sitting down,
Mm-hmm.
having him enjoy, a hard day's work
Mm-hmm.
by eating like his candy, his abuelita chocolate, and unfortunately watching Mission Inn Ave. And then
Yeah.
in front of it, I had the pyramid constructed and had everybody take a piece. And so, and then
Yeah.
again, a reminder of like, it's a fun little thing that everybody was so excited for. And they're like, I'm going to make my chocolate. I'm going to do that. Like, people were so excited. People were literally taking like a couple. But then it was also like, again, a reminder of like, one, we're actively destroying this literally
Mm-hmm.
chocolate pyramid, even though it's a fake pyramid at the end of the day, but we're literally destroying the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of again, like even though it's a fun little thing, this like passive way of destruction.
Yeah.
And sort of like questioning like what other ways are we actively destroying our culture without
Yeah.
really realizing it.
Yeah, and I think like even even though the show's almost like coming to its end, like for the folks who have gone to see like your piece without like having seen like that the chocolate pyramid, there's like remnants of that. I know there's like your pedestal has like words on it, and like even like the artist statement kind of like references the pyramid that was there before. So I think now there's just like something like that's being translated left, like over like once again the simulacra that's like left this sort of experience of like, oh, like this something was here but now it's not, and it was stolen too, like you're not stolen, but like people were also taken like actively, and yeah, I don't know, I think it flows very well with I mean this experience that you kind of made for folks to experience, flows very well with like the ideas that you're playing with. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's exactly like I had the different moments of the pyramid drawing on the side, of being like there was a pyramid here made of gold, but like the drawing I made literally looks nothing like the actual pyramid that was there. But people don't know that. People, like if somebody were to again see that the only proof they have is these handwritten things scattered throughout, and sort of like you're left to believe that this is real. And again, questioning like what is real, what's not real, what do we choose to believe. And I mean, I'm exposing all the truth here, but like I think that that's sort of part of it. With that, also a fun little fact, this is also a reference to one of my all-time favorite pieces, Untitled Portrait of Ross in LA by Felix Gonzalez Torres. I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. You know that piece?
I think so.
It's Felix Gonzalez Torres was a queer artist who did a lot of work during the AIDS epidemic, and that one, from my understanding, I'm gonna cry. I love this piece so much. I think this is one of the pieces that like when I was like in high school that I like really made me appreciate art a lot. Art a lot, and essentially it was supposed to be, from my understanding, like the way that he wanted his partner wanted to be, either his partner or him and his partner, the ideal way that he wanted to be, but unfortunately couldn't achieve because of AIDS. And sort of the candy's in a corner and people sort of take away the candy until there's nothing left as to sort of showcase like his death and his passing, but sort of like the taking of the joy and the taking of the candy, and sort of like the I don't know, just like all of that. And so I really, really love that piece. And so this is sort of my own little homage to that, and my own little reference to that again, of like the idea of taking it away until the only thing that's left is nothing, or in this case, honestly, even worse than nothing, is a retelling of something
that isn't even
that isn't even good and
close to what
essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm like I can go like there's so many different like little details in there that I, like try to scatter and like even like the box in front that's written like no one will stop you from taking, because quite literally nobody stopped. I mean, I guess technically yes, like the indigenous folks probably were trying to stop them, but like at the end of the day they couldn't, because those bitches had guns and fucking wickedness in their heart. So you know,
Totally.
and it's just also been so interesting. Like
Yeah.
that box, also people have been like writing on it. Like every time I go, there's like a new little tag mark on there. So it's just like very interesting seeing like the ways in which people
Yeah.
have been
Interacting.
interacting with it and
Yeah, and maybe
retailing
even
it.
yeah, and maybe it's even unintentional for them, but like it's like creating this like layered history of reworking the work and once again
Exactly.
playing with this idea of simulacra. So I think that's really cool. Also, since we're talking about like the visual elements, something that you often, or I mean, I think more in your most recent work have been playing with is like this red that we're surrounded by, and
Mhm.
I know like the piece there's like the borders of the red outside, but like the tones in the piece itself like are very warm. Um, I don't know, like, do you want to talk about that and kind of like maybe so your like audience knows like why you have been? I mean, I'm pretty sure you've talked about it before, but like just another reiteration of like the color red and maybe how it exists within this piece and maybe how you kind of connect that to a lot of the ideas we're talking about right now.
For sure. I mean, for me, has been my comfort color because when I was at UCLA, it was such a intense time that I literally developed panic attacks that lasted for months. Truly, for like 3 months, I literally had like an anxiety and panic attack like almost every day. It was absolute hell. And I often found myself wearing this exact outfit that I'm wearing right now. It was the most comfortable thing that I could slip on. And I just felt very safe in this. And I would go on like literally like at 2 in the morning to go scream in parking lots in this outfit. It was just like the quickest thing that I could put on, and I felt very comfortable. And over time, this color just kind of kept following me around, and it just kept getting more and more intense to the point where it was literally everywhere, literally everywhere.
Mhm.
And then when I started diving a little bit deeper into this color and finding out that um, the red, a lot of red dyes come from cochineal,
Mhm.
and how that has a lot of practice, a lot of what's it called, history to indigenous folks, especially in Mexico, and sort
Mhm.
of when, from my understanding, red wasn't a prominent color in a lot of European paintings until they came here
Mm.
to Mexico and found a lot of like indigenous folks would use red, and then they took that out there and then were able to make very vibrant reds that they were unable to achieve prior to that.
Mhm.
And so when I like found out about that, it made me like love it even more because I remember growing up, we always had nopales, and they had the
Mhm.
cochinilla, and I used to
Mhm.
always pick at them because I was like, what is that? And every time I would do it, it
It,
would just literally look like it was like bleeding. And I remember being so horrified and afraid because I thought I was killing something. But
yeah.
then there was also something so like beautiful about the color of it,
Mm.
the richness of it. And so I just sort of fell in love with the color even more once I found out about that history. And the red I used is also very similar to it. And so I've just been loving it. And so with the painting itself, um, I the red board is something that I've been doing for a while just
Mhm.
because I love I tying all of my pieces together with
Mhm.
this like red line.
Mhm.
Um, it's also an homage to Louboutins with the red bottoms because I
Mhm.
love fashion. And but with this painting of my abuelo, I put him in the red shirt that I'm wearing right now because when I was painting it, I wanted to think of how would my I was trying to think of like my abuelo at the age that I was when I was painting it, which was like
Mm.
24. And I
Mhm.
was like my grandpa being like 24, 25, and then trying to like see myself in him.
Mm.
And I was like, well, what better way to put myself on him than literally having wear my red shirt? Because I'm like, he definitely would not. I don't think he had a red shirt like that. At least not that bright.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like my own again way of breaking
Mhm.
reality and showing that this is again a simulacra,
Mhm.
simulation. I'm inserting myself into this
Mhm.
thing to further again exemplify the fact that this is not real, but again, for folks who don't know, they would think it is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm telling you, there's so many like different things. I'm like, I'm obsessed with like the smallest of
Yeah.
details in there, from that to the like his again his like fucking
Yeah.
his pose being a Norman Rockwell
Yeah.
reference, Norman Rockwell being a copy of fuck, I forgot his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, Norman Rockwell's style isn't even his style. He copied that
Mm-hmm.
style from another artist that he
Mm-hmm.
was essentially, I think, mentored by, or he was just like a really big fan of.
Yeah.
But that guy was gay, and
Mm-hmm.
so they banned him from a lot of history, and they instead decided to put Norman
Yeah.
Rockwell, and a lot of the things that he did, a lot of his paintings were the portrayal of like the American, like the
Mm-hmm.
perfect
Mm-hmm.
American, but like
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a simulated
Right.
version.
Right.
And so I was like, what better way than to reference the
Yeah.
man who literally also does a lot of
Yeah.
simulations of the American, like the perfect
Mm-hmm.
American household. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I literally love diving deep into a lot of this shit.
Totally. Do you feel like you like this could exist as a series of works, or do you feel like this piece needs to exist on its own? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, this was just meant to be for my like it was initially just like gonna be like an homage to my abuela, but
Mm-hmm.
then the more I started getting into the research of those pyramids and of ancient aliens and of this book,
Yeah.
I just started going deeper into it, and I definitely want to dive deeper into exploring simulacras and trying, because I think a lot of my work prior to this has been a lot of what's real, what's not real,
Mm-hmm.
and playing with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that as somebody who has very intense dreams to the point where I don't know when I'm not dreaming and when I am dreaming, and like having a lot of dissociations. Like I do struggle with sometimes deciphering reality. So for me, that's something that I've always been very, very drawn to. And so I can see myself wanting to push this and try to figure out different ways of exploring different simulations, different copies of copies, and also diving deeper into sort of my culture. I would love to do one on like also my mom's side of the
Mm-hmm.
family, just doing like different family
Yeah.
histories and uncoverings. But I don't know how that would look truly,
Yeah.
because yeah, I don't know. And I'm also like I would also love to do more sculptures and
Mm-hmm.
different things of that, but I don't have anything very
Yeah.
clear.
Outlined. Yeah. No, for sure. I guess like to kind of like bring this conversation to an end, just kind of like thinking about the show, and I'm thinking about some of the conversations that we had with the artists when we were kind of discussing what they were going to be presenting, and one of the conversations that we had with Mariah Green, love you, was kind of, I think all the artists were at different points of the work, and also just like we're all humans and trying to navigate and fulfill every other need that we have to do survive, and um and I know, like, I remember, like, I was kind of discussing how, like, I felt like, at least for my piece, like, it wasn't where I felt like I wanted it to be, and blah, blah, blah. And, but I mean, I'm proud of it. I do feel a lot of pride of that, Thank you. And then yours too, I think we're all, like, really proud of the work that we did, for the show. But I think, something that we kind of talked about in that conversation was like, even if it's not exactly like the image that we were thinking of or whatever, I think as artists, the reason I feel like a lot of us, maybe not for everyone, but a lot of us kind of continue to push is that there's always like the want for like what's next, or like what more can I do with this idea, or what more can I do with this visual, or what more can I, present. Um, so I don't know. I think that's kind of like where we are, and I think that's maybe where you are right now. And at least these ideas that you're kind of playing with, this was definitely like, yes, it's like a beautiful finished piece, but it's also like maybe like the point to the next space of like, what else can you be kind of thinking about? Or how can you like transmit it in a different medium, like you're talking about sculpture and we were all like, before this conversation, we're also talking about like performance. Maybe there's like ways that can be kind of pushed through, so like, I don't know, there's like an infinite ways of kind of taking this, but I'm excited to see where this goes. And
Me too.
I'm really like satisfied with like the work that you did too, and it's so beautiful and
You too.
inspired.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna try and figure out different ways of doing it. And I feel like this is one of the, well, not one of, but I know that for me, I've always just been very hesitant about making work that explores my culture just because I have always had these feelings of disconnection.
Mhm.
And I always felt very like it would almost feel a little bit inauthentic
Yeah.
to talk about different cultural elements just because I'm like,
Yeah.
Again, I'm like, I'm not going to do like an Aztec calendar.
Right.
I'm like, or I don't know, just something like very like, very like specific indigenous things. I'm like,
Yeah.
that is not me.
Yeah.
I think about sort of like Frida Kahlo and how she sort of the different conversations of her was appropriation versus appreciation.
Mhm.
Sort of like I remember when I was diving into that and being like,
Yeah.
I wanna be mindful of whenever I do. So
Yeah.
I think that as I continue to move forward, it's more of these conversations I'm having with myself of like what do I feel like I have the authority, or not necessarily authority, but kind of almost like permission to speak on. Because I'm like, again,
Yeah.
as much as I can love and claim to be like, I have, blood from different indigenous or Aztec communities, I'm like, I don't
Practice them. Yeah, exactly.
I don't practice that. I
Yeah.
don't have
Yeah.
their shared experiences.
Yeah.
If I grew up there and lived there, it'd be a
Right.
little bit of a different story. But
Yeah.
I don't. I grew up
Right.
here in the States. So like
Yeah.
when I do talk about these things, it is oftentimes through, like I said, once I realized like the book of simulations, I was like, oh, that's why I've been feeling this disconnect, because it's like these different things that I've been this is how I've been experiencing my culture because of all of these different layers of disconnect. So that's why I'm like, moving forward, I definitely want to explore my feelings of like, where do I fit within this culture, like.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess like kind of bringing this to like the broader context of like Chicano art, I think like historically when, the movement was really pushing through, like during the civil rights movement and everything, like it definitely was about like, I don't think it was the intention of appropriating, but like there was a lot of like visuals and imagery that were being reappropriated to kind of bring a wholeness to like, who we are and who we need to be, because, politically a lot of spaces and institutions do not want us to exist at all, and so I think it made sense, to kind of do that during that time. And I think a lot of artists still kind of, connect through that, and a lot of folks, and who appreciate art or just, whatever, like they definitely connect through that. But like I think it's still important to like you're saying, kind of be conscious about the histories and who's doing what and who's not, because like maybe, like I could be like, oh, like I'm an indigenous person and blah blah blah, and I have like no practice with that. But then there's actual indigenous peoples like back in Mexico who don't even have the rights to their own sovereignty, And anyway, so I totally understand that. But I guess like, I think something that's happening now that, I've read in different like books and articles, and we also talked about in like my classes, is like there's definitely like a new push with like what Chicano art is, or if people still identify as like Chicano artists, or they're just like artists who have grown up around Chicano culture, or who have grown up around like the immigrant experience. And, there's influences of that and visuals that are being presented, but that's not the work, like it's more of like who we are becoming and who we want to become. And like, I don't know, there should be pride in that, that we're like allowing ourselves to really flow as we need to, so I don't know, it's
No, I mean, you brought up like a good point of like during the times in which these movements were first happening. Like, again, I believe like a lot of these things did serve a purpose.
yeah
it's also kind of like because they're trying to have us disconnect from our culture, and so as a result, it's kind of like a pushback of like, no, like this is of equal importance.
Yeah.
Like these symbols, these practices, these different
Yeah.
things. But again, I think that it served its purpose for sure, and I think that it's important to have a lot of these prides. But I think that now I think it's more important to be a little more nuanced, a
Mm-hmm.
little more
Mm-hmm.
mindful of thinking of like where are we getting these symbols, because again, not everybody can relate
Mm-hmm.
to every single thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a monolith. We all have like our own
Yeah.
different individual tribes, our own individual. Mexico's fucking huge.
Yeah.
It's a huge region. You're telling me everybody is Aztec, like no tea, no shade, but like like
Yeah.
that's why I'm like I
Yeah.
trying to figure out like again these
Yeah.
different nuances and trying to figure out like
Yeah.
what does it mean for you. And again, like this is why I'm like this is such a complicated thing, because it's like
Yeah.
for some folks like they have no way of tracing any of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So this is unfortunately their only
Yeah.
connection to it.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't ever want to shoot it down. That
Yeah.
that's bad.
Yeah.
Because I understand the significance
Yeah.
and the importance. I just am trying to be more
Yeah.
cautious and aware, and trying to
Yeah.
figure out again like
Yeah.
where is this where are you connecting this, like why are you doing this, what are the intentions of this, who's benefiting from this,
Yeah. Yeah.
questioning a lot of the different powers, a lot of these different things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We could do like a whole other episode if you want.
I'm like
Invite me. Let's just have a whole ass conversation about
I can literally
all
go
this.
on for hours and hours about this. It's like you don't understand, like we
Totally.
have like
Totally.
thoughts and research. That's why when I was
Yeah.
first coming up with this, I was like, how the fuck do I put all of this into a canvas?
Yeah.
And hopefully it translates well, because I'm
Yeah.
like, every time people, I'm like, what do you think of this? I'm like, guys, we're going to have a sit down. Like, do you want to listen to my TED Talk right now?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that's exciting. I think that's what like the strongest works really like do, is to like never have the conversation end,
Yeah.
And so I'm excited that you're doing that through here, through this piece. And yeah, let's definitely make a part 2 to this,
It's literally just
and part 3 and the part 4, part 5. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to, interview. And I'm excited to see who you work with next, and what your next pieces do, and like the visual elements you continue to carry across. And, definitely, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for interviewing me, for letting me be part of the curation process with you, having me along this whole journey. I'm very honored and grateful. Thank you also to the Cheech. Thank you, Esther, and everybody at the museum who helped prepare and give us this opportunity to showcase a lot of these artists and have, be able to have these conversations, be able to display works like that speak of this.
Yeah.
I'm very, very grateful for all of that. And I hope to continue to push that and continue to hold space for conversations and for things like this. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well,
thank you all for watching. Where can they find you?
EmmanuelCamachoLarios.com. I'm also on Instagram. You can share that because it's kind of funky.
It'll be right here. And y'all know where to find me.
Yeah.
Everywhere Art Perry.
Yeah.
The podcast Red Thoughts Perry.
Yeah. Is there more coming soon? More Red Thoughts?
Once
more
this
podcasts?
is done, since I'm all done with the interviewing the artists of Desde los Cielos, I will now continue this and be interviewing other artists of the Inland Empire and SoCal region, and just honestly art in general, but I would love to do a lot more here to document all of these artists.
Yeah.
And so if you know of any artists, send them my way.
So excited.
I'm so excited. I'm like, the roster I have of artists coming up, I'm like, gonna be interviewing like artists like Rosie Cortez. I'm so excited.
So excited.
Love her. Oh my god, I'm so excited. As well as just like part 2 with other artists. Like I'm gonna have Yulisa on here again sometime. I will have you on here again sometime. Just different checkpoints of different artists. Like once they continue to evolve and
Yeah.
come back and explore. So I think this would be a fun project.
For sure.
But yeah, anywho, y'all know where to find me. Check us out later, and adios.
Bye.
Ciao. You.
Yes, thank you. Oh my god, these are like so fun.